Will the government's crackdown on knife sales online actually work to prevent knife crime? What's your thoughts on this? We're taking your calls now. We'd love to hear from you, particularly if you've got another suggestion on what else can be done to tackle the UK's knife crime problem. 0207 862 2222 is the number. Now, the government has confirmed that retailers selling knives online must ask people to upload their ID and proof of address before they are allowed to purchase a knife. They'll also then have to show their ID again to the delivery driver or the delivery person when it is made in person. Now, the new rules have been brought in after it was revealed that the Southport murderer, Axel Rudakubana, had purchased a knife online despite being underage. So, and with previous convictions, Reem, do you think this is a good idea?
I think it's probably broadly a good idea, but what it does do is it puts all of the pressure on businesses like Amazon and almost none of the responsibility on the authorities that failed to prevent people like Axel from accessing these kind of products, but also actually from them being referred to prevent. So Axel was referred to prevent, the government's anti-extremism prevention scheme, 3 times. So the fact that the authorities themselves have failed, I think, is the real story. And actually, restricting companies like Amazon from being able to sell these products doesn't necessarily achieve what we're trying to aim, which is that people like Axel don't access the products in the first place.
Well, I suppose it's not restricting their selling of it, it's just meaning that they have to put a few more barriers in the purchaser's way. So actually it's affecting everybody that just wants to buy a good set of kitchen knives online.
So it's not an either or, I think. This is a multi-prong approach that is required so that we as a country and the government as our government does everything it possibly can for this sort of evil never to recur. Clearly, where there is scope to tighten up rules for knives, absolutely I'm in favour of that. And if a 2-step identification process helps prevent people like Rudakubana, and let's hope there aren't many of them out there doing what they did, then that's got to be a good thing. Of course, you're right that we need to look at the prevent system and how it is dealing with terrorism, how it's dealing with extremism, and the government is indeed reviewing that. And it's also asking the very important question of whether we need to redefine what terrorism is so that it doesn't have to necessarily be coupled with a political ideology.
Or religious ideology, because he didn't seem to have either.
And the murders...
Well, he was found with an Al-Qaeda
and he pleaded guilty. Well, it was a CIA analysis of that, but he was found guilty of a terrorism offence. So clearly there was terrorism involved, but the murders themselves were not treated as terrorism because they couldn't show that they were actually linked to a particular ideology. We need to root out this sort of evil, and one of the ways to do that is to try and prevent them getting access to the weapons, but we also obviously have to get involved and intervene effectively way before they're actually considering buying the weapons.
OK, let's go to the calls first. Mike from Derby, what's your view on this?
Oh, good morning, all of you. Hope you're all well. It's a little bit extreme, but the route I would go down is pure and simply you sort out an age of what the child is, and if the child is below that age, you hit the parents and hit them extremely hard.
Okay, so actually, so this is your alternative to just doing the double checks on the sales of knives. So you're talking once the crime has been committed. So this is after the fact. Once a crime has been committed and the person is under the age of 18, you think that the law should then go after the parents rather than just the child?
Yes, but I wouldn't say 18. I'd go younger than that. But you know, I mean, this is so serious. Something really has got to be done.
But in the case
and if it's extreme, then it's extreme. But it's got to be done.
But in the case of Rudakubana, he was 17. So if you're going to make it 16, it would have had no impact on Axel managing to get hold of the knife. It would have had no impact on his parents once this horrendous crime had been committed.
Well, no, after the event, obviously it's too late. What you've got to do is try and put it out of people's head to go and get a knife, because the circumstances of doing that are going to be far greater than what it's worth them doing it.
Yeah. So how do you do that, Mike? That's the thing.
This is what I'm trying to get across is, say you got a child and he goes and purchases a knife. The police do a stop and search, find the knife. They then go to the parents and hit the parents really hard, give them a criminal record or whatever. It doesn't matter.
So you think that will work? Is a deterrent?
Well, yeah, it will, because what it'll do, people will be aware of what is happening, and parents will start taking more responsibility for the kids.
Okay, so you think it's a parental problem, this, Mike? Thank
Well,
you
no,
very much.
I'm not saying it's a parental problem. I'm saying it is one way of trying to... You've got to stop it in the bud. It's no good after the knife's been purchased. This has got to be stopped before they even think about getting one.
So using that as a deterrent. I've got you, Mike. Thank you.
Axel's own parents referred him to Prevent.
Well, that's what
there was still the failure there. So I think that what's important to note here is that we can put responsibility onto the parents. Ultimately, there is that separation, and many parents will say, I have no control over what my 17-year-old son does. And these parents actually did try to take responsibility and tried to get him referred to the government's prevention scheme, and yet the scheme failed. I think what's really important to note here is that nobody genuinely needs a zombie knife. I think those restrictions can happen, but restrictions on knives
they are now illegal
they are now illegal as of last year. What we have to be, I think what's really important to note here is that regular kitchen knives, those kind of restrictions are of course going to prevent everyday people from being able to access them. But even if we take away and separate that, I'm not sure it will have that much of an impact. If you are a criminal, you are going to be able to access these weapons no matter what.
Okay, and if you can't access those weapons, you'll find something else. Exactly. Alan from Peterborough, what's your view on this? Do you think, I suppose, if there's something we can do to make it a little bit harder, we should do it, even if it won't have a huge impact?
Yeah, I'm going to throw you a curveball, actually. Something I don't think's been discussed yet. Do you go back thousands and thousands of years ago to the Iron Age when knives were first invented? The reason for the point on the knife, at the end of a knife, is to kill and stab something, like a beast or something, to survive. And then you use the blade to cut the meat up to cook and eat. Now, in modern days, there is no need for a point on a knife, on any knife. I can guarantee you that all you people in the studio there, no one has ever used a point on a knife.
I have.
You don't need it.
Alan,
What for?
have, and I'll tell you what for.
For?
A watermelon. Anytime you've got... No, and I'm being really serious about this because it's actually an idea that has already been brought up in the show, and there is a real sort of simplicity in the smartness of it, so I'm not poo-pooing the idea at all, Alan, and thank you for calling and bringing it up. But there are situations when you're cutting particularly hard vegetables, or like a turnip or a watermelon, where it is much easier to get the stab in and then pull back. Whether that need...
You don't really need the point. You don't need the point on a knife, and that's where the problem is. I was a chef for 10 years, and I tell you, I never used the point. If your knife is sharp enough, and the blade, if you keep your knife sharp, the blade...
Alan,
you can kill someone with a really sharp knife.
But what Alan's saying is, and it's a very smart point. Most people at home when they cook in a kitchen aren't getting their knife sharpened every 6 months as they should be. Alan, I learnt this when I went for a cookery class. I haven't had mine sharpened for 5 years. I really need that point to be able to cut anything at the moment. But you're right, we should be getting them regularly. There's not many places you can go to get your knife sharpened very easily. To your point, if what we're talking about here is making the tip less rounded, so that you only get the sharp,
like a bread knife.
So you could still really damage someone. You could still hurt somebody, but maybe less likely to kill.
I think the point is that if you are somebody that's going to try and kill somebody, you're going to be able to access a weapon regardless. And actually restricting the size of the knives, or indeed if you're able to have that extra point, ends up hurting people like yourself who just want to be able to not have to sharpen their knives every 6 months.
We don't have Reem's argument on guns, though, do we? We don't say, well, let's just have guns, because if you're not going to use a gun, you might use a knife.
I actually am in favour of the decriminalisation of being able to have a gun. I think people in this country should be allowed to have guns in order to protect themselves. As a woman, if a man comes into my house and tries to kill me, I have absolutely no way of defending myself because I'm so much weaker than them.
You are statistically more likely to be shot if you own a gun.
Just look at America, please look at America.
Well, I think the US is a good example
I understand
of people being able to protect themselves and defend their property.
It's a terrible example. I understand, Reem, your instincts. I understand your increased vulnerability as a woman, and I'm not poo-pooing that whatsoever. But if you look at the carnage that is unleashed by people, and it is people who kill, not guns, but unleashed by people using guns in America. The idea that we would start to go down that route absolutely horrifies me. And I think one of the ways that we're civilized in this country, I'm not saying America is uncivilized, but there are elements of their culture which I don't think are particularly civilized, including, for example, the death penalty. But one of the ways that we stand out is that our police mostly don't even carry arms, and I'd like to keep it that way.
I just want to go back to, sorry, I do want to go back to the calls because we're getting lots in on this, so thank you. John from West Yorkshire, what's your view when it comes to knife crime in this country and how we bare minimum reduce it?
Hi, I think personally, I think purchasing the knife isn't the actual issue, it's the actual possession of the knife. And children from the age of maybe 10 to 11 to 12, they can get incorporated into gangs, and there's no discipline in schools, there's no education in schools regarding, you know, carrying it, the effects of carrying it, what it could possibly do. We should also have, like, groups for children that are maybe going in the wrong direction, and then maybe point them to, like, the military, like the Navy.
I do have a feeling that we do have these sorts of things in place, maybe not the directing them into the military, but the possession is interesting. So you would go for a more stop and search?
Well, technically, it'd have to be a whole group thing. It'd go from the parents to the teachers to the police. And it needs to be a group, you know, a group thing. It can't just be laid on one person's shoulders, you know. It needs to be a community thing,
so you want teachers to just stop and search?
Well,
they do have those knife rings where you have to walk through.
Yeah.
Sometimes, in schools they do have them where you have to walk through. It's not very effective because if you know that there's going to be one of those things, you put it in the park. So
when I was in school, I went to a state school in a London suburb, northwest London, and we had. I knew my peers, that mostly boys, carried knives on them on the way to school and on the way back. Predominantly for self-protection. They genuinely believed that they were at risk of being stabbed, especially when they were moving to different areas and they were involved with various criminal activities. And so it meant that they felt as though they had to carry a knife on them to protect themselves. When they saw that there were police at the school gate and they saw a metal detector, they popped the knife next to a tree in the park on the way to school, went in, nothing happened, came back out and grabbed the knife on the way back. So it literally did nothing. I think people
So an answer to that would be to put the knife arches in perhaps at the end of the school day, so that it's much harder for them to hide the knives. Potentially,
or actually just the fact that they were able to hide them before they saw at the school gate it was there. They turned around, went to the park, dashed it over there and then came back.
The authorities need to get smarter.
They need to get smarter because these
Storm, that is what we've just heard there from a panellist is real life experience of someone who knew people growing up in London carrying knives. And that is just an indication, another indication of the extent of this problem. We've moved slightly away from the horrors of the Southport killings to talk about knife crime more generally. It is a massive problem. As the father of a young boy in London, I'm now thinking of these things in ways I never did before. Some of my friends are now talking about it, wondering whether they might one day leave London, although this is clearly not just a London-centric problem. We have to intervene. It's not just about the weapons. We have to intervene far earlier and in far more clever ways, try and root out the macho culture and the culture of fear, because if we don't do that, we lose people. And I spoke to a police officer in my local area in London on the weekend, and I talked to him about what seemed to be a spike in local crime. He was beside himself. He happened to have a liberal mindset, but he agreed with me that you can lose children as young as 10 or 11, that they have no respect, some of these kids. They almost seem to be dead inside. How do we reach these people? How do we stop them getting to that point?
You've mentioned London quite a few times, and it isn't just a London problem. This is all over the country. And it used to be a particularly bad problem in Glasgow until they stopped treating it as a criminal issue and treated it as a social issue. And perhaps that's something that can be rolled out across the UK. I wonder if anyone on the line feels that way. John, thank you for your call. Val from London, London again. What's your view on this?
Yes, hi Storm. All the best for the baby coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I just want to say, oh my gosh, this country needs to get more family orientated. The root of the cause is the fact that young boys and girls are feeling hopeless for the future rather than hopeful. Now, the government, first it starts in the home. You know, when it was taken away about disciplining our children, this has got worse.
Taken away about disciplining your children?
Well, yes, some parents' rights were taken away.
What rights were taken away? Because in England you can still smack your child.
Right, well, some people just don't believe they can smack their child or tell their children off.
Some people believe that there's other ways that you can discipline children without smacking a child. But your key issue, if we get down to it, is that parents aren't disciplining the children in the way that they should and have done in the past.
So, all I'm saying is that I really believe that we must put more in government to look after our young people for the future. They are feeling unprotected, hopeless. We want to give them hope for the future. And yes, you know, curbing the wholesale of knife online is one way, but that's not. We've got to go to the root cause. We've got to go to the root cause and start having something better. The government they're meant to be taking care of the people in the state. And they need to do more for young people, also about bringing family units together better.
Well,
and that's my thing.
Thank you very much for that. Kathy from County Antrim, I think that's something that actually probably my panel and everyone on the line would agree with, that actually getting down to the fundamentals of why it is a problem is probably the best place to start. Do you think that's fair?
Probably. I mean, to me, as a child growing up through the 1980s in Northern Ireland, I mean, stop and search was just an integral part of life. You know, that was it. From grandmother's handbags being searched right down to the pram you were pushing being searched for incendiary or bombing devices.
Kathy, did that in itself, just the stop and search, because it's quite a controversial issue now, particularly around young people and around race. But in Northern Ireland at that time, did that in itself cause any issues? Was there controversy around that, the type of people that were being stopped?
No, it was everybody. It was across the board. Everybody was being searched. I mean, everybody was petrified. You know, look at the Oma bombings. I mean, anybody could have been responsible for planting a bomb or leaving a pram outside, you know, because people did leave their prams outside shops at that stage, you know, in those days. You know, so that was the whole point, you know, and women's handbags being searched, prams being searched, you know, the whole spectrum. If I was 10-year-old and I was carrying a backpack, I was searched.
Coming back from school, yeah, I'm sure. Kathy, so are you suggesting more stop and search could be
absolutely
help to reduce the numbers? Well, I mean, you're not the first caller today to suggest that, but it doesn't...
It will not stop it, but certainly if there's that kind of a deterrent. You know, why have an objection? If you're doing nothing wrong, you're carrying nothing, why would you object?
What about...
It used to be a soldier or a policeman looking in your handbag. If you've not the hide, you've not the hide.
Yeah.
And what about deterrent? Because I'm with you that we need to get in there early, and I'm interested to know more about how Glasgow tackled knife crime from a social perspective. But, and I say this as a liberal-minded person, is there something in tougher automatic prison sentences for anyone carrying a knife? Now, that would could destroy a young life, but so can knives.
Well, it also goes to our earlier comment, our first caller actually today, basically saying to get the parents. You know, if somebody under the age of 16 is caught carrying a knife, then the parent gets punished.
I don't think it's fair to blame the parents. I think that Matthew's absolutely right, though. We need tougher tougher sentences for people that commit those crimes and actually that are carrying those knives in the first place. But actually, we don't have the prison spaces for those people, so we need to build more prisons. We also don't have enough police officers. I mean, the fact that police officers are often more concerned about investigating somebody's posts on X than they are about a child or a young teenager carrying a knife, I think is a problem in itself. I think we need to have a conversation about why we're not investing enough in the police services. I have no problem with stop and search, even if there is that racial aspect to it. I don't care. It will probably save people's lives. So ultimately, I think that we need to have more stop and search. We need more police officers on our streets, ensuring that we are ultimately more safe.
A visible presence is essential.
We're going to have to finish this debate here, but don't be surprised if you're asked for two proofs of identity when you're trying to purchase knives in the future.